On the 26th September 1999 in Manhattan in the United States, after a 39-year-old lady, Gladys Ricart, broke up with her abusive, possessive, and controlling boyfriend, Augustine Garcia. Augustine viewed Gladys as his personal property, and he refused to let her go. After the breakup, Gladys fell in love with another man named James Preston Junior. After dating for a while, James proposed to Gladys, who gladly accepted the marriage proposal. On their wedding day, Augustine drove into Gladys' house as the wedding ceremony was in the process. He drew his gun and shot Gladys 3 times in front of everyone in the room. Sorrowfully, Gladys died on her wedding day. Why would you kill your ex-girlfriend on her wedding day because of jealousy? Join us as we unravel the events leading to the brutal murder of Gladys Ricart. Gladys Ricart was born on 19th of December 1960 in a small province of the Dominican Republic. She was the youngest of the 3 children in the family. Her elder sister was known as Norma Rosario, and her brother was known as Juan. In the mid-70s, her elder sister, Norma, who was just over 20 years old at that time, immigrated to the United States and settled in Manhattan in New York City. She then found a good job there, and she established herself. While in school, Gladys studied diligently, and she was one of the best students in her class. At the age of 17 years, when Gladys was still studying, she fell in love with a boy from her school. The boy was her first love, and they were madly in love. Later, Gladys became pregnant for her boyfriend. When her boyfriend learned of the pregnancy, he ended their love relationship, and he immediately stopped communicating with her. At the time Gladys was giving birth to her son, she had already turned 18 years old. She named her child Davis. Gladys lived with her parents, who supported her in raising the child. She worked so hard so that she can raise money to take care of her baby. She also realized that she had limited opportunities in the Dominican Republic, so she had a dream of going to the United States in search of better opportunities. While working, she also saved for her journey to the United States. Even though she was saving the money wasn't enough to enable her and her son to survive in the foreign country, so she left him behind under the care of her parents. In the summer of the year 1982, Gladys flew to the United States and settled in Manhattan. While in Manhattan, she stayed with her elder sister, Norma, who already had her own family. While in the United States, Gladys got a job in one of the restaurants in Manhattan. She washed dishes in the evening. She also handed out brochures in the streets. In addition, Gladys also sorted and laid goods on shelves of the supermarket. While in the United States, Gladys began studying English, and after she was done, she joined a college as she continued doing part-time jobs. 1 year later, Gladys got employed as an accountant in one of the companies in New York City. Later on, she graduated from the college, and immediately she joined a prestigious university where she studied masters in economics. In the year 1985, while still studying, Gladys landed a good job where she earned stable income. She was able to rent her own apartment and even started saving money to buy her own place. She could now afford to take good care of her son, so she took him from her parents and lived with him. She was able to send him to a prestigious school. After graduating from the university and earning her master's degree, she got employed as a chief accountant, one of the largest travel company in Manhattan. A couple of years later, Gladys and her sister, Norma, teamed up and they relocated their parents and their brother, Juan, to the United States, and they settled happily in Manhattan. One autumn morning, when Gladys was heading to work, she met a 41-year-old man named Augustine Garcia on the subway. Augustine was born on February 1951 in the Dominican Republic. He was born in a poor family. After the death of his mother, Augustine immigrated to the United States in the mid-70s. He was able to learn English, and in the mid-80s, he became the leader of a large Dominican community in New York State. He became a successful businessman, owning a 2-story house, several expensive cars, and a yacht. Augustine was married, and they were blessed with 2 children who were all males. However, this couple later divorced each other. Augustine won the sole custody of their 2 sons in the court. He lived with them in North Bergen in New Jersey. So after Augustine and Gladys met on the subway ride, he immediately got attracted to Gladys, and he made the first contact. They got lost in the conversation. He asked her for her personal number, and in return, he gave her his business card, which had his personal number. Later that evening, Augustine called Gladys and he invited her for a dinner. She accepted the invitation without hesitation. On the weekend, they met in a restaurant where they had a good time, and they also had a lot of time to know each other well. They started calling each other every day, and they would meet and spend their free time together. Augustine gave Gladys a banquet of flowers and expensive gifts. He took her to exquisite restaurants. Soon, Gladys introduced Augustine to her family. Gladys' family was very happy for her and believed that Augustine was a perfect match. Augustine got along very well with Davis, who was Gladys' son. Augustine also introduced Gladys to his two sons, and they all accepted each other. After dating for 1 year, Augustine and Gladys moved in together. The couple soon moved out of their rented apartment, and they moved into a big house. After living together for some time, Gladys was eagerly waiting for Augustine to propose to her. She was turning 33 years old, and she wanted to get married and have a complete family. However, marriage was not in Augustine's plans. He told Gladys that he had already went through a failed marriage, and he was not going to marry again. Gladys loved Augustine, and she didn't want to end their relationship, so she hoped that Augustine would change his heart and marry her. Later on, Augustine's sons from his previous marriage began to constantly hurt Gladys' son. Soon there were constant fights and conflicts among the children. Augustine's sons, who were obviously older than Gladys' son, were always the instigator of those fights, and their father always took their sides. They enjoyed bullying the young Davis. Gladys encouraged Davis to do his best to get along with them, hoping that the children needed time to adjust. But the situation only worsened as time went on. To get matters worse, Gladys began noticing Augustine's dismissive and uncaring behavior towards her son, and when she told him that his children were bullying her child, he didn't care. After 2 years of living in a tense household, Gladys realized that the tension between the children would negatively impact her son, Davis' future. Gladys told Augustine that living under one roof was not working, so she moved out of his house. Augustine understood Gladys' situation, and he didn't want to break up their relationship, so he rented a lovely 2-story house for her and her son in Ridgefield in New Jersey. The house was located near his home, and it was only a 9-minute drive. Later on, the couples continued meeting as usual, but as time went by, Augustine started becoming possessive and more controlling towards Gladys. He scrutinized the people whom she socialized with on and off her job. He also insisted that Gladys should always keep contact with him, whether at job or not. The couples engaged in endless fights. During one of their fights, Augustine's anger spiraled out of control to the point where he pulled a gun and threatened Gladys. This made her to fear for her life, so she ran to the bathroom and locked herself up. Augustine started cheating on Gladys. He had multiple affairs. One night, Gladys went to meet him at his office. When she arrived, she found him with another woman who was much younger than her. The two were engaging in sex. Gladys could no longer tolerate Augustine cheating on her with multiple women. She could also no longer tolerate his possessive and controlling behaviors towards her. So in the autumn of 1998, she ended her relationship with him, and she moved out of the house that he had rented for her. She then informed her family of the breakup, and from there henceforth, Augustine was no longer welcomed in Gladys' family. Even though Gladys had ended her relationship with Augustine did not let her go because he viewed her as his property. So he always called her repeatedly. He would leave prism, red roses, white roses, and a Bible at Gladys' doorstep. Gladys' family saw Augustine's behaviors as odd, and they knew the gifts he left at Gladys' door had hidden meaning. However, Gladys only thought that Augustine was attempting to win her over again. In February 1999, Gladys had already moved on with her life after leaving her ex-boyfriend Augustine Garcia. During one of her lunch break at a restaurant near her work, Gladys met a man named James Preston Junior. James worked in the field of accounting, but he also had a side gig as a musician. The two fell in love at first sight, and after a couple of dates, they made their relationship official. For the next 2 months during their relationship, Gladys was more happier than she ever did. Later on, James gave Gladys a marriage proposal. and she happily accepted to marry him. So they scheduled their wedding to take place on the 26th of September 1999. The couple's family were very excited about the news, and the wedding preparations began immediately. The couples flew to Hawaii to arrange their honeymoon on a paradise island. They then returned and went ahead to prepare for their big day by inviting their friends and relatives to the ceremony. On the other hand, Augustine continued stalking Gladys' house without her knowledge. Almost every night, he would drive by Gladys' home and watch her for hours. Some other nights, he would park across the street and watch her for hours. On the 12th of September, 2 weeks before the wedding, Gladys went shopping at the mall. While there, she ran into Augustine, who was following her. Augustine placed his hands around her waist as if they were still a couple and offered to escort her. Gladys, knowing Augustine's temper, she didn't resist, but after the incident, she hurried back home. On Thursday evening, on the 12th of August, Gladys and James were enjoying a quiet, romantic evening alone in her home. It was 6 weeks before the wedding day. Then suddenly, Augustine showed up at her door and knocked. She asked Gladys to let him enter so that they can talk. However, Gladys refused to let him in the house. Suddenly, Augustine became very angry and violent. He screamed at her to let him in, and he threw rocks into her windows. Gladys got afraid of what Augustine might do next, so she rushed to her phone and called 911. The police arrived and restrained Augustine. However, Gladys decided not to cause problems to her ex-boyfriend, Augustine, so she didn't press any charges against him. The wedding day finally arrived, and that morning, Gladys' friends and family were at her house getting dressed and preparing for the ceremony, which was scheduled for 4 p.m. Photographers and videographer were present, ensuring that Gladys captured every moment of her big day. A Rolls-Royce and 2 stretched limousines were parked outside Gladys' home to take everyone to the church, which was the wedding venue, while Gladys was distracted by taking wedding photos. Her family outside happened to spot Augustine driving by multiple times to avoid causing Gladys any unnecessary stress. Her family chose not to tell her that Augustine was looking outside. After making a few passes, Augustine parked his car across the street, then headed towards the door carrying his briefcase. During this time, Gladys was in her living room passing out flowers to her bridesmaid. Gladys' brother, Juan Ricart, happened to be outside and noticed Augustine approaching the house. Juan knew Augustine shouldn't be there, so he approached him politely to find out what he wanted. Augustine said he was invited and calmly walked towards the house with Juan closely following him behind. After entering the home, Augustine saw Gladys beautifully dressed in her tiara and wedding gown. He did not look at the bridesmaids and flower girls who also stood in the room. With a quick glance in his direction, Gladys ignored Augustine and continued to hand out banquets and post with her bridesmaids. As she reached for another banquet, all hell broke loose. Augustine grabbed a .38 caliber pistol from his briefcase and fired 3 shots at Gladys at a very close range. The first bullet hit her in the shoulder, a second bullet hit her in the chest, and the third on the head. Gladys died on the spot. Juan tackled Augustine to the ground. Unfortunately, Augustine got up, slipped away from Juan, and continued shooting. All the wedding guests ran as quickly as they could outside. The family called 911. Inside, Juan was finally able to take the gun from Augustine before he had a chance to reload. Juan fought to keep Augustine pinned to the ground. He wouldn't stop to try getting back his gun. Screaming, he wanted to kill himself. In a matter of minutes, the police arrived. They entered the home and found the 2 men fighting in the kitchen. Quickly, the police stepped in and took control of the situation, handcuffing both Juan and Augustine until they could figure out what was going on. By the time the police were able to check on Gladys, she was already dead. Augustine was arrested on the spot. Meanwhile, James was standing at the church excitedly waiting for the arrival of his bride-to-be. Unexpectedly, he received a call informing him that his bride, Gladys, has been murdered. James became devastated beyond repair as he mourned for his loss. During the trial, Augustine gave out a completely different story of what happened during Gladys' death on her wedding day so that he can escape the hands of justice. He said that he never broke up with Gladys and they continued seeing each other in the months leading to her death. He actually had no idea that Gladys was seeing another man. He added that he never knew anything about Gladys' wedding, and on the wedding day, he had shown up at her house but completely got shocked when he learned that Gladys was getting married. He reacted violently, causing a scene. Juan, who was Gladys' brother, ambushed him, and he had no other choice other than pulling out his gun to defend himself. Gladys was accidentally shot dead in the process. On October 2001, during Augustine's trial, his defense accused Gladys of living a double life. She continued to see Augustine, and on the other hand, she was engaged in a relationship with James Preston, and they even kept their engagement a secret. Augustine's defense showed the jury a video of Augustine and Gladys together in a grocery store less than 24 hours before the wedding day. With the help of the video, they tried to convince the jury that Augustine and Gladys had not broken up, and instead they were in an intimate relationship. The defense urged the jury that they should convict Augustine with manslaughter and not murder because he was provoked by passion. On the other hand, the prosecutors provided a series of disturbing accounts that suggested that Augustine had been stalking Gladys in the weeks leading to her death. They also told the jury that a few weeks before the wedding day, Augustine went to knock on Gladys' door, demanding to speak to her, and when Gladys refused to let him in, he threw stones on her windows, thereby breaking them. Gladys had to call 911, and the police came to her rescue, and they restrained Augustine. The prosecutor also told the jury that approximately 1 week before Gladys and James' wedding day, Augustine left a collection of red roses, white roses, and a Bible at Gladys' doorstep. They argued that these items often brought funeral. The prosecutors also presented the jury with the video footage which were captured on the wedding day. The jury carefully analyzed the footage as they saw how Augustine shot Gladys 3 times. After a day of deliberation, the jury found out that Augustine was lying to the court. He was not provoked by passion when shooting Gladys to death, as he initially claimed. They also found out that Augustine was aware of the wedding between James and Gladys. On the 1st February 2002 in Bergen County Courthouse, the jury found Augustine Garcia guilty of first-degree murder. He was also found guilty of a related weapons charge and 2 counts of child endangerment because children were present in the living room when he had fired at Gladys. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of being eligible for parole after 30 years. Augustine attempted to appeal 3 times, but his appeals were rejected.